بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. I'll try to keep this week's reminder a short one, and again, the choice of this topic wasn't my particular choice, particularly. It was, you could almost say, a response or a further request from others after last week's session. So last week's session we discussed, in a way, I mean, you could describe it as a form of colorism, i.e., this ideology and this idea that people are different races, which isn't necessarily the case, but that these different races, some are better, some are less, either believed consciously or subconsciously, and that these things are defined by color. And ideally, we reiterated the message we're saying over and over again, that no one is better or less than someone due to their color, but they are better due to their taqwa and their righteousness and their actions. And we touched upon some of the language used by the Arabs in their narrations. And the reason why we chose to do that was to try and draw attention to those people who have issues of color. That what would they do and how would they behave if they were to meet the companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or the prophets themselves? If they were to find out that certain prophets were darker in complexion than they were, if they have a belief inherent to them that darker is bad or not good, then how would they behave and react to righteous icons of Islam who are likewise dark? And that was mainly the message and purpose behind this discussion. It wasn't in any way, shape, or form a means to clamor or to advertise any kind of superiority. And that is something which those who know me know that is not my message at all. That has never, ever, ever been my angle. I've always said to people, other people, black people as well, that if that when you discuss these narrations and you discuss these descriptions of the prophets and the companions, it should not be done on the avenue or of any kind of seeking virtue. There is no virtue in how a person looks. It means nothing. The most that can be said, is that it is used, or it can be used, or it should be used as a means to combat a inherent hatred that some of us may have to others or to themselves. There was actually an interesting book. I haven't read the book myself, but the title of the book I found really amazing. I think the title of the book is something like "Those Who Taught You to Hate Yourself." I thought it was a very powerful statement. Those who taught you to hate yourself, meaning that there are many people who are dark-skinned, and they may feel at some level inferior. They may feel at some level that they are not as good as, or not as beautiful as, or not as attractive as others due to the color of their skin, which is silly and stupid. It is a known fact that people, every single person has, and this is not a fact by statistics, it's an observable fact, that every person has their own personal view of what is beautiful and what is not. It is what it is. Society may deem that X, Y, and Z, or a certain person is good looking, and it may be shared by a number of people, but it doesn't mean that every single person will have those views or share those views. There's some people who like lighter skin, and that's just how they are. That's how they are personally inclined, and there might be others who are personally inclined to darker skin, or not inclined to any particular color skin. It's just how human beings are. Allah has created us different, and at the same time, Allah created our tastes and our preferences as different. And there's no such thing as an absolute type of beauty. It doesn't exist. There are things which are beautiful, but that doesn't mean it's shared by everyone. I think that's the most that can be said from these kind of narrations. Or most, that's one of the things that can be taken for us in this day and age, for us in our times. Those people who have these perceptions either against themselves or against others, that how are you going to now behave and react when you hear that the righteous people who are higher than them and better than them in status were darker than them. And just as a quick review, we just mentioned that in Arab language there are when it comes to describing a person's skin color, there are centuries was aswad, which is basically translated as being black. And in the side that language, they have varying shades of black. Those have been very black, and those have been very brown, and those are in the middle, and so on and so forth. I mean, use the words like Adam, which is technically being in the middle shade of blackness, you could say. And Shadidul Udma means very, very dark brown. And Ashham means lighter brown, and Asmar means light brown. So these are the languages that were used by the Arabs. Interestingly enough, they use the word green is also to refer to someone who is aswad or black, and that was a description used for the Arabs. And interestingly enough as well, the use of the word abyad or white was never actually used to describe a color, but was actually used to describe virtue. So if someone was described as being abyad or white, it was actually referring to their piety and righteousness and being free from sin, not actually their skin color. And finally, we mentioned that whenever they mentioned in Arab language someone who is what we now call today white, then the word they used was more, the words they used were things like red, ahmar, or ashqar, and so on and so forth. So these were the things that was used at the time of the companions. And what was requested, getting back to the reminder, what was requested today was, because I only mentioned last week 2 companions and how they looked. I think 3. Mentioned Bilal and how he was described, and also we mentioned Ali ibn Abi Talib and how he was described. And I mentioned that there were descriptions of other companions, and that I think intrigued some people to want to know more. And that's fair enough. And even when preparing for this reminder, I have to say I was taken back and surprised. Not that I was surprised of the narrations that I came across, but surprised at how I had my own mental projections of how companions were, and actually reading their descriptions was very different. And I think we all project in our minds how people may look like and how they may be. And I think these projections are highly influenced by our society, obviously. But it would become a surprise for a person if they learnt about how people looked in the past. For example, how people were short or tall or bald or fat or these kind of things. It does become surprising. It does kind of open up that level of humanism, that level of looking at them as being normal human beings, as opposed to being almost like angels, or almost like being superheroes or characters in a play or a film. So I thought it would be interesting to conclude this topic, I guess you could say, by going through more further descriptions of the companions of the Messenger of Allah, so we can gain. So when we hear about stories of them, we can maybe have a better visual projection of how they looked and how they were and how they behaved, and I guess also so we can combat the projections of others of how the companions were. So without further ado, I think the first one we mentioned last week was Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and like I said, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud was one of the great companions of fiqh of al-Islam, one of the major ones even, and also of Quran, an icon and one of the religious, I'll say, knowledge leaders of the Sahaba, as in one of those who we as Muslims benefited greatly from his knowledge he passed down to us. And as you can imagine, the companions, we benefited from the companions in many different ways. Some companions who put a lot of effort into propagation and spreading Islam through da'wah and whatnot, but we haven't really got necessarily much from them in terms of knowledge. Some companions preserved the hadith, like you have Aisha and Abdullah ibn Mas'ud and others who preserved narrations, preserved hadith, and so on and so forth. So each Sahabi had their virtue, as we find in today's society. Each Muslim has their own virtue, and that which makes them shine. And that's something we should all acknowledge, that we can't all be Umar al-Khattab, we can't all be Abu Bakr. Some of us have to do other jobs and other roles, and we all can contribute to society. But back to the point. Abdul Mas'ud, one of the descriptions mentions, kana khafif al-lahmi, he was skinny. Abdul Mas'ud was skinny. I mean, even myself, I never really projected a particular body frame, but that's how he was described. And also he was short, qasiran. He was khafif al-lahmi wa qasira, and also he was described as being short. شديد الأدمة, and he was very dark brown. وكان من أجود الناس, and he was from the most generous of the people. So that's kind of how Abdul Mas'ud was described, as being skinny, short, and very dark brown, or very dark black, however you want to describe that. The thing is, like I said last week, how we use language today shouldn't be translated how it used in those times. So we mentioned that black, aswad, there were shades of aswad or black. The middle shade was described as Adam, and he was shadid al-udma, so he was on the lower end of the scale of what Arabs described as being black. Ali ibn Abi Talib, the nephew of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the one who married the daughter of the Messenger of Allah, Fatima radiallahu anha, and birthed, or was the father of Hassan and Hussein. Hassan being the 5th Caliph of Islam after his father Ali, for a short while before he gave it over to Muawiyah. A fact often most people don't know. And Hussein, who was unfortunately killed in a battle between some of Yazid's army and himself. So those are the two sons of Ali. And generally speaking, those who are considered from the family of the Prophet or Ahlul Bayt come from Hassan Hussein and from Ali. And it says here, كان علي. So Ali was Adam Shadid al-Udma. He was brown, Shadid al-Udma, very dark brown. Thaqil al-Aynain. He had very heavy eyes. Dhakhm al-Batni. And a friend of mine, he had a laugh at me and said to me, why was you so diplomatic last week when describing Ali? Why didn't you just simply say he was fat? Because Dhakhm al-Batni means he had a big, huge belly. I didn't consciously do that. I mean, I was trying to just describe it as nice as possible, as one should describe in the sahaabah. But yeah, he wasn't like Ibn Mas'ud, which was very skinny. Ali was on the opposite side. He had a very big belly. ذا عضلات. He was also very muscular. And manakib, and also broad shoulders. في أذنيه شعر. Inside his ears, he had hair growing. قد خرج من أذنيه. So he had hair growing that exited from his actual ear. وكان إلى القصر أقرب. And he was closer to being shorter. So it doesn't mean he was قصيرا, short, but he was closer to being shorter than others. Yeah. Then we have Bilal ibn Abi Rabah. So yeah, I'm sure every person of African descent, whenever they accept Islam, they often hear people say, oh, Bilal, he was black as well, radiyallahu anhu. But yeah, Bilal was, what made Bilal, I would say, not unique, but what made Bilal, I guess, stand out is that his mother was from Ethiopia. And again, my friend pointed out to me, another one of these things which you have to get in our minds correct is that when we think of Habash or Abyssinia as Ethiopia, again, we're using the wrong yardstick here again. We're using modern yardsticks to understand ancient times. Meaning that Abyssinia or Habash, the borders wasn't the same as Ethiopia. The borders of Abyssinia actually extended a lot wide. It was a lot larger than Ethiopia. So Abyssinia actually at some point in history actually even included Yemen. So even Yemen was also included as being part of Abyssinia. And also areas of Chad, which is now called Chad. And so on and so forth. And also places like, what's that country called? Eritrea. And other countries around the area. So they all were, like Sudan, all those countries were all part of Abyssinia. So when we say his mother was from Habash, we don't mean Ethiopian. We mean from the land of Habash, which could have been from Yemen, could have been from Eritrea, could have been from Chad. But as a friend of mine highlighted, is that from some modern scholars or recent scholars have made research into the topic and found that it seems as though he may have had a lineage tracing back to Chad, or what's known as Chad, which is kind of central North Africa. But he described him as being, so Bilal كان رجلا Adam. He was Adam, which we mentioned as like the middle range of what's brown. شديد الأدمة. Now that description brings it down to the lower end of being it as dark brown. Nahifan, he was also skinny. And Tawila, and he was tall. So He was taller than, you could say, than Abdul Mas'ud and Ali, on the scale of what the words tall, short, and not so tall and short. We don't know the exact height, obviously. Abi Dharr al-Ghifari, those know the Sahabi, Abi Dharr al-Ghifari. In some narrations, very briefly, he was described as being Rajulun Aswad. He was being a man who was black. Now, much description as to the shade is not known. He was described as being black. And Hakim ibn Hazim, another Sahabi, another great Sahabi, mentioned here, Kana Hakim. So Hakim used to be min Sadat Quraysh. He was from the great noblemen of Quraysh. And that's important because unlike Bilal, who was not, Hakim ibn Hazim was from the noblemen of Quraysh. And as Zubair said, Kana Shadidul Udma. He was very severely dark brown, Khafif al-Lahmi, and he was also very skinny. So we can see a pattern here. In reality, in fact, although people think of Bilal as being black and say Bilal was black and so on, you find that in terms of skin color and shade, again, there actually wasn't a difference in skin color between the leaders of Quraysh, or at least Hakim, and the likes of and other people of the time of the Messenger of Allah, other companions like Ali and Mu'adh ibn Jabal. So they didn't see Bilal as being black because he was the exact same color as them. Rather, he saw Bilal as having almost a foreign heritage. As part of his heritage was not from Al-Arab. And this was, generally speaking, how things were seen in a historical context in the past, that people saw you as from your heritage and the background of your heritage and your tribe, then your color. Your color was a factor of who you are, but it wasn't. They didn't define you as a color. Your color was just a way to describe you, at least amongst the Arabs, at least. As you'll see later on, that doesn't necessarily mean that was the case across the world, but it was something at least amongst the Arabs. Then we have Muhammad ibn Abi Maslama. So Muhammad ibn Maslama, sorry, another great Sahabi. And we have a hadith, I have a narration which says, Khan ibn Yunus shahida Muhammad fatah Misr. So they saw Muhammad conquer Misr, conquer Egypt. وكان في من طلع الحمص, and he was from those who also took control of Hims مع الزبير, with another companion called الزبير. قال عبادة ibn الرفاعة, and another person, Ibadah ibn الرفاعة, said كان محمد بن مسلمة أسود طويلا عظيما, and he was black, tall, and عظيم means great. You could say, like, I guess you could say great in structure. His body was you could say huge, you could say. But what's important, there was another narration which brought another description of Muhammad ibn Maslama, which again ties in with that beautiful title of that book, Those Who Made You Hate Yourself. Anyway, he mentioned here, someone said to him, قال أنت أجمل العرب, you are from the most handsome of those who are Arab. So, as you can see here, someone who was described as being Aswad, clearly, obviously no one denies that. Oh well, tell the truth. There are those who deny that. But we can see here that the Arabs at the time of Messenger of Allah clearly saw that there was beauty even in those who were described as being Aswad. And the reason why I say some do deny that is because I do remember, unfortunately, and this is not to say this is with all people or other students of knowledge, but it's just the mentality does exist. That I was in Medina University and we was having a discussion, me and an Algerian brother who's from Algeria. As you know, Medina University has people from all over the country, all over the world. So we were having a discussion about beauty, and he was quite adamant that white skin is beautiful and black skin is not. And I said, no, brother, it's down to preference. You can't say that there's some absolute beauty attached to skin color. It could be anything. I mean, a person could be white and not be good looking, someone black who was good looking. It's down to personal preference. And he was adamant, said, no, that's not the case. The actual fact is that lighter skin or white skin is beautiful and black skin is not. And I laughed. I thought, brother, I think you misunderstand here. I'm not saying that you don't find good-looking lighter skin people to be attractive. But what I'm trying to say to you is that this is subjective, down to personal preference. But unfortunately, he was adamant. This is not a subjective fact. This is an objective fact. Everyone knows that, he said. So there are people out there who do believe and think that way. but clearly from the narrations that is not the truth. And I guess it's not just the narrations, it's just an observable fact. Some people just don't share that. It is what it is. Let me have Mu'adh ibn Jabal. And Mu'adh ibn Jabal, again, another great companion. Mu'adh, and a very famous hadith, which I remember, this is where he was riding behind the Messenger of Allah and he asked the very famous statement, do you know what Allah's right over mankind is and what mankind's right is of Allah? And he said, Allah and the Messenger knows best. And then the Messenger of Allah basically explained to him that Allah's right over us is that we do not worship anyone besides Him. And our right over Allah is that we are not punished if we do so. And he said, أَفَلَا أُبَشِّرُ النَّاسِ, should I not give people the glad tidings? And he said, no, don't do that because it might depend on that fact. As in indulge in sins, depending on that, they'll be saved by that one thing. Anyway, that's Mu'adh ibn Jabal. He was a very great companion. He used to lead the Salah, he used to read Salah very long, even to the time Messenger of Allah rebuked him and said, don't read the Salah so long because people find it difficult to keep up with your long Salah. Anyway, so it says here, دخل عائذ الله ibn Abdullah. So a person called عائذ Allah entered the masjid يوما مع أصحاب الرسول. One day whilst there were other companions of the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. أول خلافة عمر, during the first of the Khilafah of Umar. So this is obviously after the death of the Messenger of Allah and during the time of the Messenger of Allah. قال فجلست مجلسا فيه بضع وثلاثين. So I sat in a sitting, a gathering, and there was about 30 odd people sitting there. كلهم يذكرون حديثا. All of them were making mention of the hadith عن الرسول عن Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. وفي الحلقة شاب شديد الأدمة. And there was a young man who was very dark brown. حلو المنطق. He was very, had a very good speech. مضيء. I'm not sure how you would describe مضيء or as translate مضيء. But anyway, هو أشب القوم, and he was the youngest of them سنا in age. فذا اشتبه عليهم من الحديث. And there was a hadith that was ambiguous to them. They weren't sure it was hadith. أردوه إليه. So they referred the hadith back to this person. فأفتاهم, and he gave him a fatwa. لا يحدثهم إلا حين يسألونه. And they didn't speak to them until they asked him a question. So he was quite reserved until they spoke to him in return. ولما قضي مجلسهم, when the majlis ended, دنوت منه, I got closer to him. وسألته, and I asked him, من أنت? Who are you? يا عبد الله, who are you, O slave of Allah? قال أنا معاذ بن جبل. I am Mu'adh ibn Jabal. So that was interesting, how this person didn't know who he was, and he asked him who he was. And it also describes that they had majalis of dhikr, that the sit-ins where they would describe and talk about issues of hadith and Islam. But the point here is obviously he described him as being Shadid al-Udma. So again, we see Mu'adh ibn Jabal, it was the same skin color as Ali, the same skin color as the others mentioned before, and also the same skin color as Bilal ibn Abi Rabah. There's also some more narrations describing him, because like I said, it's not just about color. I also want to know a bit about what other things he looked like. So it mentioned here another narration that he was tawil. He was also very tall. Hasnu thagar. I'm not sure what thagar is, to be honest with you. Azimul aynayn, and he had very strong eyes. So azim is great or big. So he had very big or strong eyes. And also his eyes were very white, very big, strong, and white eyes. Ja'd, and he had very deep curly hair. Very deep, we'll come to that a bit later on. And his hair was very deep curls. And they're often, interesting enough, that when they describe, you could say African hair, they could say, the word they use in Arabic is also Ja'd. Anyway. And the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, خُذُوا الْقُرْآنَ مِنْ أَرْبَعَةٍ. Take the Quran from 4 people, as in they are the most proficient. From them is Ibn Mas'ud, which is what we mentioned here, one of them. Ibn Mas'ud, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, which is what we're discussing right now, Ubay, and Salim Mawla Abi Hudhayfa. Then we have another Sahabi, Sa'd ibn Abi Ubadah. Sa'd ibn Abi Ubadah. And this is another description. And Sa'd ibn Abi Ubadah was from the Ansar, and is mentioned in another narration. I don't know if it's too long, but he was from the leaders of the Ansar tribe. He was from the leaders of the Ansar tribe. And he mentioned, just very brief, because we've got about 11 pages here to cover. I'm on page 6. So let's just try and get to the point. As I mentioned, anyway, so he mentioned about they were collecting money, and they was said to the people who were collecting money, whoever doesn't give their full amount that it should give, I think it was referring to zakah, then they have cheated us, and there's mentioned some rebuke towards those people. And one of the people stood up and asked, فقام إليه رجل أسود من الأنصار. So a black man from the tribe of Ansar stood up, كأني أنظر إليه, as if looking, فقال يا رسول الله أقبل عني عملك. And basically he addressed the Messenger of Allah صلى الله عليه وسلم. But this person who was described as being رجل أسود, he was referring to Sa'ad ibn Abi Ubadah. Sorry, Sa'ad ibn Ubadah, not Ibn Abi Ubadah, Ibn Ubadah. Also we have Suhaib al-Rumi. This is an interesting one. Suhaib al-Rumi. So this one is interesting because his nickname was Ar-Rumi, the Roman. He was actually called the Roman. And the reason why they called him Roman, as you'll see here in his description, I mentioned, let's get to the point here. It says, where are we? It mentioned here, I'm trying to abridge, it's a very long hadith to get to the point. And where are we? Where is it? Give me 1 second. I can't find it. Yeah, I can't find it. Okay, how about this one? Okay. It's in the, okay. So there's a mention here. So I can't find it here. I'm looking, trying to scan the hadith quickly, but I'm not. My eyes are not falling onto the point of the hadith. So unfortunately, anyway. But there's a mention here in one of the books of the ulama. They mentioned that إنما سمي روميا. He basically was called the Roman, and he's not actually Roman, but he's called the Roman لحمرته, due to his redness. And again, this is another example of how the Arabs describe someone who is what is modernly called white as being red. So the reason why he was called the Roman is because he was generally very light-skinned. And again, it mentioned here due to his humrah, due to his redness. So again, this is a good one because it indicates that not everyone who was at the time of Messenger of Allah in amongst his companions was Shadid al-Udma, although it does seem that way by all the narrations I mentioned that that's not the case. Obviously, there were people of varying shades, they're not all one shade, but there were some who were very light skinned. But those who were white in skin color, like this one here, like this individual here, they were described as being Ahmar, and he was extremely white. This narration here was a very important one. It's a very, I'm not sure if I have enough time to read all of it, but this is referring to Ubadah ibn Samit. Ubadah ibn Samit and the conquest of Egypt. So mentioned, فَلَمَّا رَكِبُوا السُّفُنَ. So when they boarded the boats, إلى المقوقس. المقوقس is a place in Egypt. دخلوا عليه, they entered it. تقدم عبادة. So Ubadah went forward after disembarking the boat onto the place of Maqoqas. فهابه المقوقس لسواده. And the people of Maqoqas, of the place in Egypt, they were taken back by that. And it says haba is like, well, haba like to be, I don't know how you describe it. I don't want to call it fearful or be fearful. I would kind of describe it as being taken back. But it was taken back by how dark he was. لسواده, due to how dark he was. فقال نحو عني هذا الأسود. So take this black person away from me. He said about this companion, take this black person away from me. فقدموا غيره يكلمني. So then others went forward, stepped forward to speak to them. فقالوا, and they said, إن هذا الأسود أفضل رأيا وعلما وهو سيدنا وخيرنا. And they said in reply, this black person you're referring to, he is the best of us in terms of his opinions and his knowledge, and in terms of his opinions and views and his knowledge. He is the best of us in terms of knowledge, and he is the Sayyid. He is the most Sayyid. He is the most honorable, you can say, of us, and the best of us. And this part of the narration is really important because it actually shows in action that the companions didn't stand for racism. the person said, take this black man away from me. And another person addressed them. And the first thing they did was address this racism and address that this person that you say take away from me because he's black actually is the best one amongst us. So this actually, you could say, gives us a practical example that how the best of companions, the best of people, the companions of the Messenger of Allah actually addressed head on the topic of racism and didn't, they weren't complacent in the racism. They didn't just say, oh, well, that's how you feel, I'll just accommodate to your racism and I won't say anything. No, before they even got to negotiation and got to discussion, they addressed the topic head on. And it's a long discussion, talking about the conquest of Egypt. But the point was is that hold on. The point was in addressing this is that apologies about that. Just got a phone call came on my phone. It just seeing to us how racism is something that needs to be addressed and tackled directly. And as this phrase I've heard recently, which does sound like a good phrase, it sounds great. It seems to be what we're talking about. It's not enough just to not be racist. You should be anti-racist, and not just be a person who doesn't exhibit racism to other people. We need to be people who combat and address it and tackle it head on. And when they see racism, they address it head on. Let's quickly draw a conclusion here. So we have another companion, Ubaidullah ibn Abi Mubarak. So another Ubaidullah. كان عبد الملك. So it's mentioned that Ubaidullah says, إذا ذكر ابن أبي بكر يقول الأسود سيد أهل المشرق. So he is described as being the black one, the best of the people of the east. كان عبيد الله آدم شديد الأدمة. So Ubaidullah used to be brown, a very dark brown. مفلج الثنايا. I couldn't find the word muflij. I did look for the muflij الثنايا, but I am guessing it means protruding teeth or strong teeth, because teeth. طويلا, he's very tall. أبرج العينين, very profound eyes. ضخم الرأس, he had a huge head. I'm just describing what it. ضخم is big, so he had a big head. غليظ الوسط, and he had a very coarse and strong midsection. So that's a description of Ubaidullah ibn Abi Baraka. Last two, we have Ubay ibn Ka'b. As you mentioned, hadith Messenger of Allah, earlier on, you mentioned take Quran from 4. We covered 2 already, Abdul Mas'ud and Mu'adh ibn Jabal. The third one was actually Ubay ibn Ka'b. So we have a description here of Ubay ibn Ka'b. I mentioned here, it's a long hadith again. I mentioned خرج معه رجل آدم خفيف اللحم. So a man left out and he was Adam and he was very, very skinny. So it mentioned here that Ubay ibn Ka'b, he wasn't like Ali, he was actually lighter than Ali, but he was Adam, which is, like I said, the mid tone of what Arabs described as being aswad, black. And finally, this is another one. This one actually could be a long discussion. I'm not going to go into that discussion. And the reason why it could be a long discussion is because we actually have conflicting narrations about this individual. Some describing him as being light-skinned, and some describing him as being dark-skinned. And interestingly enough, what was mentioned here in this research thing, because you can find this stuff online, is that the most commonly narrated narrations about Umar al-Khattab, Umar ibn al-Khattab, is that he was light-skinned. However, those narrations, although they're the most commonly narrated in the books and quoted, are actually the weaker ones. And the stronger narrations are the narrations of him being dark-skinned. And the reason why those other narrations are weak is because of one of the narrators called Al-Waqidi. And most of the ulama have described Al-Waqidi as being weak in his, is not taken as an authority in hadith, in narrations. Anyway, so mentioned here, رأيت عمر الخطاب, I saw, this is hadith, I saw Umar ibn al-Khattab, خرج ما خرج لأهل المدينة, he left the people from Ahl Medina. He was a rajul, Adam. He was a man who was Adam in color. So he was lighter than Ali, but it was just Adam, not Shadid al-Udma, but just Adam. Tawil, he was tall. And described here, Umar al-Khattab is a very interesting description. He mentioned that Umar al-Khattab, he was tall, ambidextrous, and this description here, and another friend of mine, he made a joke. He said he doesn't reckon that these kind of people get much love, but he was talking about people who were bald. Umar al-Khattab actually was bald. He was, as in some people, again, something we never think about. And this is another thing which we don't think about these things. There was one time I was with one mashayikh, his name is Sheikh Falih Harbi. I was in his house, and as he was doing his little lecture and little reminder, he moved his shimar and hat back, and I saw that he was bald. And for some reason, it struck out to me that you never actually think about the sheikh's hairstyle, because mostly in Saudi, scholars, they have their hair covered. So to see one without his hair covered, and see that he's bald, it came as a surprise. But yeah, so Umar al-Khattab, the older narrations we hear about Umar being strong and a leader and whatnot. He was very tall and very strong. He were, but he also was bald, and he used to walk fast and he used to tower over people. So he used to be very tall, and I guess for some maybe a bit intimidating due to his tall nature of that. And so last thing I want to mention, just as a little description, there's not really a description of any particular Sahaba in particular, but just a description of the Arabs at the time of the Messenger of Allah. And this is taken from Ibn Qutaybah. And Ibn Qutaybah is described by the ulama as being the Adib al-Ahl Sunnah, as in the scholar who was well versed in the language of the Ahl Sunnah. He was from the time of the Salaf, like the time of Abu Hanifa and Malik and that age. But he wrote many books in collecting poetry and a lot of books in the language. You will go back to Ibn Qutaybah. And Ibn Qutaybah, he mentions that he's describing the Arabs. What's the general description of the Arabs in comparison to the A'jam, the non-Arab? And one of the descriptions he mentions is al-Ja'd min al-Arab was sabtu min al-Ajam. So he mentioned here that generally deep curly hair is a description of Arabs, and straight hair is actually a description of non-Arabs. So again, we may have an idea of how Arabs at the time of Messenger, how they looked, and especially nowadays when we look at Arabs today, we might think of how Arabs are. But one thing you need to understand is that historically speaking, the Arabs of today are generally very mixed with surrounding nations, especially as those same Arabs traveled up north and conquered many of those lands before they came back to the Arabian Peninsula. And obviously that has an impact on it. So just to let you know that this was some of the descriptions of the companions of the Messenger of Allah, and also generally of the Arabs. I do think it's beneficial. Having curly hair and having dark skin didn't make any of them great or good people. But what it does do is it repels and removes the fallacy that somehow there is virtue in our whitewashed history that we are subjected to in our modern day society. Anyway, we'll draw it close today. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I hope you guys have found it beneficial, and hope you guys have a beautiful and nice weekend. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.